So one of the problems that we have as Christians is the problem of being able to hear the voice of God, being able to be inspired by God. Already we have the difficulty of being able to see Him. He is invisible. And that has been a major stumbling block for so many people. But add to that, the difficulty of being able to hear Him or being inspired by Him. And God Himself wants us to hear Him. He said about His own Son, "Behold my only begotten Son in whom I'm well pleased." Listen to Him. But then we don't get to hear Him on a daily basis. How can we hear the voice of God? How can we be inspired by God? How can we solve this major spiritual problem that we have? And that is what I'd like to talk about in this video. So for us to be able to understand and hear and be inspired by God, to be able to hear the voice of God, we have to understand how the devil works, how he tempts us, and what he uses as a strategy to distract us from hearing the voice of God. And to be able to do that, I'd like to draw your attention to C.S. Lewis. In the late 30s and the beginning of the 40s, during the Second World War, C.S. Lewis was a columnist for the London, the Guardian in London. And he wrote an article every week. And over time, this column became a weekly letter to Christians. And the letter was written from the perspective of two devils, the senior devil and the young devil. And two of them obviously taking their directives and their directions from Lucifer. Now the senior devil is called Screwtape, and the young nephew, who is the young devil, is called Wormwood. Over time, this letter will be compiled and published as a book, and is known as the Screwtape Letters. Very famous. And I remember coming in contact with it when I was in novitiate. So the senior devil, Screwtape, who is the mentor of the apprentice devil, gave him an assignment. And the assignment he gave him is to go and win the soul of a young Christian, a young man, away from God for the devil. To go and lure this young man away from God, to tempt him, to take him away from God and win him over for the devil. And so immediately Wormwood was given this assignment, the young devil, he jumped into action. He started strategizing. He came up with so many strategies on different ways to tempt this young man, to make him trip and fall away from God, and then into the hands of the devil. Then the senior devil, the Screwtape, decided to reprimand him, and he wrote him a very stern letter to rebuke him. And he said to him, "Stop wasting your time coming up with all these strategies that you are trying to come up with. Our plan is very simple. Our plan is to create so much noise in the world that man can no longer hear the voice of God. That's it. Create so much noise in the world, fill the world with so much noise that man will no longer be able to hear the voice of God." Boy, and that was more than a half a century ago, when C.S. Lewis was writing about noise in the world. Television had just been invented, and it was just very tiny minority of people that had television. Obviously, C.S. Lewis was a prophet of his own time, because today, noise, we live in a very, very noisy world. Our world noise is almost like on steroid. In fact, C.S. Lewis is going to be blown away by the amount of noise that the world has today. Today we have all kinds of gadgets. We have cell phones. Our televisions today are 24/7, and not just 24/7. We have thousands of channels in our television sets. And we have radios that have tons and tons of stations. And we have cell phones, iPads, iPods, Our billboards are shouting. Everywhere you look, the magazines, the newspapers, everything is loud. The freeways, we have built more freeways than ever before. We have more cars than ever before. So there's so much noise. And all these things are 24/7. And you know what's happening? Our minds and hearts are like absorbents. They absorb these noise. They absorb all these loud sounds. And so what then happens is that because we have soaked up so much noise, we become restless. Our minds and hearts are restless. It's going like a machine. Some of them is running 200 miles per hour, and people cannot rest. And as priests, we see so many problems like this all the time. Even young people, people coming to us who are not able to quieten their mind, people who are not able to be quiet and be silent. And that is because of the level of noise in our world. Do you know what? We have created a whole generation of noisy children. Children who are born into noise. A generation of noise. And so that's why, and I've been thinking about this, you have teenagers who will not do their studies without headphone, without some kind of earbud, listening to music. Do you know why? The reason why that is because these kids are having this noise in them. They have all kinds of distraction inside them. So in order to drown out the noise that is already in them, they have to use another kind of noise in order to drown out the noise that is already in them. So they play a music of their own choice in order to be able to focus enough to do their studies. Brothers and sisters, we live in a very, very noisy world. And in that noisy world, it becomes very difficult to hear the voice of God. It becomes very difficult for us to hear the voice of the Son of Man, whom God said to us, "Behold my only begotten Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." So what do? I want to refer you to 1 Kings chapter 19. What happened there is an amazing inspiration for all of us in terms of how we can begin to hear the voice of God. It was about Elijah. He was in trouble. Things were very, very bad for him. He had just done a major ministry where he defeated the prophet of Baal, and had declared 3 years of drought when I had a commotion and conflict with Queen Jezebel, who was the wife of Ahaz. And so Queen Jezebel wanted to kill him and wanted to destroy him, and so he was running for his life, and his life was in turmoil. And he needed voice. He needed to hear God. He needed to hear the voice of God to give him directions and what to do in terms of how to move forward. So eventually he got inspired to go up the mountain, and where God will speak to him. So he went up the mountain, and when he got up to the mountain, we're told that there was a very strong, heavy wind, obviously very, very loud and noisy. And we're told by the scriptures that God was not in the strong wind. And then after the strong wind, there was an earthquake that shook the whole place with very, very loud and noisy. Again, we're told that God was not in the earthquake, in the noise of the earthquake. And then after the earthquake, we're told there was a fire. We don't know what form in which the fire took, but we're told that God was not in the fire. And then after the fire, we're told that then there was a very gentle breeze. And God appeared to Elijah and spoke to him and gave him instruction on how to go forward. I also want to draw your attention, obviously, that is a very good, clear message that in the hustles and bustles of life, in the noisy places, God cannot be heard in those places. When we increase noise in our lives, we are not able to hear God. And God knows, and many of us, we watch so much television, we watch so much, we have our ears covered all the time, we send so much noise into ourselves. And what this passage is saying to us, if you need to hear God, we need to step away from it a little bit. We need to step away from all the noise. We need to step away from all the commotions and all the things that the strong wind, the earthquake, and the fire represented, which is all the commotions of the world. Step away from it, and you will be able to hear the voice of God. But guess who did this more than anybody? Jesus Christ himself. In fact, it became his custom to withdraw to a quiet place where he could hear the voice of his Father, where he could pray, where he could stay in solitude and be able to hear. And one of the passages that I'd like to incident in the life of Jesus that I'd like to draw your attention is Matthew chapter 14. Again, Jesus had just finished a major ministry of multiplication of bread and fed so many people. And after multiplication of bread and taking care of people and ministering to people, he needed time off to be able to withdraw in silence and prayer to listen to the voice of his Father. And so he sent his apostles across the sea. He would join them later, and so they sailed off through the sea onto the other side while he prayed. So as he was in solitude, in silence, in that contemplation, the apostles were in trouble. There were a strong wind that were threatening to capsize the boat. But in the middle of that prayer, Jesus was able to be inspired by God. He was able to be informed by God that his apostles were in trouble. They were in danger. They needed his help. Again, take notes. In the context of solitude, in the context of prayer, we hear God. We get inspired. It was at that point that Jesus then walked on the sea. He walked on the sea to rescue, to calm the storms of the life of his apostles. And this is very significant. I don't want you to miss that point. It was in the context of solitude, in the context of silence, that Jesus heard God, his Father, to come to the rescue of his apostles. And his apostles were going through turmoil and all kinds of turbulence in their own lives, which was represented by the strong wave in the sea. And Jesus was able to calm that down. When we step away from all the noise of the world, when we step away from all the commotions into solitude, into quiet prayer, God is able to come in and calm the storms of our lives. He is able to come in and inspire us. I say to people, turn off the television. I know many people, they spend too much hours watching, especially cable news. These things are absolutely dangerous for the soul. Yes, I said it. The cable news, watching it and binging on it is absolutely dangerous for your spirituality. It's absolutely dangerous for your soul. So I will cut down on it to the barest minimum. Not more than 1 hour a day should you stay in front of television watching a cable news. So when we do that and step away more and more, then we are able to hear the voice of God. We're able to be inspired by God. Obviously, we're able to hear his words through the scriptures, through the preaching, through wonderful friends that God sent in our life. I want to leave you with this last thought, which is from Psalm 46, verse 10. God said, "Be still and know that I'm God." I really want to ask you, brothers and sisters, to consider setting aside a time of quiet, of solitude, maybe in your house, maybe in a church, Catholic church nearby, maybe in a chapel. Find a quiet place, maybe in the woods. Step away from the craziness of this world so that God can inspire you, so that God can speak to your soul, so that God can speak to your mind. Do not allow the devil, who had made sure that we're not going to hear the voice of God with all the noise, with all the things that we're bombarded with every day. That is the plan of the devil. That is, in fact, the devil is winning the war the more we are not able to control the noise in our world. Silence is golden. Be still and know that I'm God. Step away for a moment and see if God will not inspire, but much, much more than that, and see if He will not quell the storms of your own life and give you peace of mind. I'd like to thank you today for listening to this very short reflection, and I hope to see you next time. Stay blessed. Thank you.